of verdant green forests and tree trunks and branches just covered with moss and lichen, and wonky and enchanting looking trees. Most of the time, those pictures are taken of old-growth forests. These primary forests are an undisturbed ecosystem, full of rich biodiversity of native species and lack of any signs of damaging human actions. From providing habitat to playing a role in the global regulation of Earth's climate, these forests support life in incredible ways. An estimated 1.11 billion hectares of old-growth forest land still remains. A report by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the UNFAO. And even those tracts of land might be fast disappearing due to industrial logging. The UNFAO defines old-growth forests like this: a naturally regenerated forest of native species with no clear indication of any human activities and where ecological processes are disturbed to the very minimum. An amended definition includes the traditional activities of the indigenous and local communities as part of old-growth forests. Other definitions are on the basis of ecology, economy, and socioculture. And so there's no universal definition to this term. And this makes it hard for us to justify its importance. Old-growth forests, aside from being taller than secondary growth forests, also have incredibly more complex layers to their vegetation as well. When one tree dies, others grow to fill in the gap. This leads to microhabitats forming, very unique areas where there are different levels of moisture, sunlight, and other resources. This allows for different organisms to occupy the forest and flourish, adding to the biodiversity that old-growth forests are known for. So it makes sense that these tracts of land are found in places that are more inaccessible or deep within secondary forests. Species that are disturbance sensitive and requires unique niches tends to flourish in such areas. In an old-growth forest systems, the canopy layers and the emergent layers are just as diverse as the forest floor. In fact, there are tons of species and other plants and epiphytes live on top of it. Epiphytes meaning plants that grow on other plants to survive. In fact, as an example, one single tree in Costa Rica is home to 126 different species of plants growing on it to survive. And so, each of these species, unique to that lush, ancient forest, is incredibly important to the ecosystem in their own ways. And degradation of the land and or extinction of the species can break down the ecological processes. Old-growth forests also go by other names: mature forests, primary forests, frontier forests, and virgin forests. The last two terms, they have a narrower meaning to them. They mean that these forests have never been cut down before. On the other hand, the terms mature, primary, and old-growth tends to take on different meaning. That is, forests that have never been cut down or logged before, or forests that have fully grown after logging. This difference in terminology creates confusion when it comes to the definition, which leads to discrepancies when we are quantifying what old-growth data is. The variability of definitions across multiple research viewpoints makes it harder for us to allocate importance to these old-growth forest systems, because a logging company can just come in and cut down any tract of land within this area on the basis of their narrow meaning of what an old-growth forest is. This unsureness also contributes to lack of research in the area. So, what is the big deal about old-growth forests anyway? These trees are carbon banks. Over their long lives, they sequestered tons of carbon into their trunks and have enabled the soil too as well. Mature established forest systems such as old-growth forest also tends to be more resilient and more tolerant to droughts and wildfires than younger forests. Although old-growth forest serves as a global carbon dioxide sink, international peace treaties do not protect it. This is out of the assumption that old-growth forests or any older forest cease to absorb carbon after a certain age, which is in fact false. The opposite is true. In fact, mature established forest systems like the old-growth forests sequester carbon, larger amounts of carbon, well into their old age. And not just the trees, even the forest floor as well, actively captures carbon over time. In the temperate zones, in the wake of climate change, protecting the temperate and the subpolar old-growth forests are very important. This is because of the soil that they currently shade. Because under these forests are permafrost soil. Permafrost contain a large amount of carbon, much more than that is absorbed into the vegetation, and so degrading the forest above can melt the soil below, releasing even more carbon. In the tropics, more than half of the species are dependent on old-growth forests. They are simply irreplaceable for sustaining tropical diversity. And more than 1 billion people depend on these old-growth forests for livelihood, according to the World Resource Institute. Of the 6 billion hectares of forest land that existed 10,000 years ago, 4 billion remain sparse. These plants, along with other vegetation, photosynthesize sugar and release oxygen, leading to a foundation of life and growth. Aside from providing food and timber, these forest lands also give water to animal and human life. Old-growth forests also have incredible recreational, spiritual, and cultural significance to the people living in and around these forests. In fact, loss of these land might mean loss of livelihood and food security. Our Earth's forests are called the planet's lungs. They are its beating heart as well. And so protecting it means saving us and all those around us.